Well, thank you for doing this. This is fantastic. And my son said that he would never respect me again if my first question wasn't, do you really come from the land of the ice and snow?
Do you know, it was a cultural exchange between the government of Iceland and the UK government. It was an arts exchange back in 19-something. And Led Zeppelin was chosen by the Icelandic government to be, they wanted us to be the representatives of British popular music culture. And they didn't really know what they were let themselves in for, to be honest. It was a fantastic time that we had there, and it just was one of the most beautiful locations I've ever been to in my life, with such enthusiasm from the people, because they just didn't know what hit them. It was, so Paige and I just sat down, and the Hammer of the Gods was sort of, how did I even know it was going to end up sort of sullied as the way it was, but it was very funny. It was a good thing.
It was conceived in purity.
In purity and valor, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then something else happened.
Well, all right. What? You know, one of the things I have to, you know, we'll do a little ass kissing and get it out of the way. One of the things I have to give you tremendous credit for is that you have spent, you know, 25 years minimum escaping from all the things that other people run toward. You seem to be the guy who went down to the crossroads and got the secret and somehow managed to come away with your soul intact. And I think that that's the greatest tribute of all. It's not everything that you've accomplished. It's the fact that you've worked so desperately to keep moving away from the weight of what you've accomplished.
Well, that is a very nice thing to say. I'm very flattered to hear that. And it's, in truth, I never see what I'm doing as being obstructive to some kind of great monolith.
Yeah.
But in truth, I mean, I did go to the crossroads. I think it was in just outside London somewhere.
That other crossroads.
Yeah, there's loads, there's thousands of them. But somebody did hand me the guitar in the dark, and I never ever tuned it properly, and so I had to keep singing. But I just think that the merit and the original intention of the sort of combination of Jimmy and myself and Jonesy and Bonzo was to keep pushing, to keep opening new avenues, to enjoy the excitement of discovery. And I don't think that popular music can ever stand still. And if it can't always be left to new musicians to print the future. Right. And I really have had such a dynamic, I couldn't call it a career, but just an exploration of music, really. And the day of Mighty Rearranger as a new album, as a new collection of songs, because the intention is as strong as it was on Physical Graffiti. Right. And that is a blessing for me, because if it was any less than that, I wouldn't even deserve that, you know, award or even be a part of it all. So that was the deal in Led Zeppelin, and that's the deal now. It's always open it up and see what you can find. And also, it really does, it exposes my naivety, which I really like. I like.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You have to stay in touch with the part of yourself that was a 15-year-old getting excited in the dark by the radio.
That's right.
Getting excited in the dark by the radio. That's part of it too.
But now I put my reading glasses on, and I get excited very quickly.
I very much want to talk about Mighty Rearranger. It's a very exciting album. But before, you just made me think of it. If I can put you on the spot, would you mind telling the story you told at dinner last night about the great radio station you heard and why you started pledging money to it?
Oh gosh, this is gonna. If this gets abroad, though, I mean,
this is just between us.
Yeah. I don't know whether I can do this without severing the relationships of a lifetime. I thought that there's got to be a place in America which rains as much as my home on the Welsh borders. And I played in Portland, Oregon. And I was driving to Lincoln City to take the highway down to Eureka, exploring this beautiful land. And I was leaving Portland, and I heard a radio station that was playing some amazing flip sides of Jive 5 tracks on Beltone or an old Raul Donna moment on Old Town or Gone Records. And the guy came on and he said, if you want this radio station to continue, please sponsor us now, because it's an NPR station. Steady. Where were you last night? And they said, we promise we will never ever play Stairway to Heaven. So I pulled out the car and using my telephone credit card, I called K-Boot in Portland. And and a very dour woman said, yeah, and your name? I said, R. Plant, care of Armit Ertigan, Atlantic Records. And Armit kept getting these
bills.
He got a quarterly report coming in from Hey-Boo saying, yeah, it's going well, and Shep and the Limelights are on major rotation, and still no Stairway to Heaven. So I didn't tell my old partners. I thought, they've had enough of me already. I can't tell them that as well.
He's pledging money on the basis of don't play that song.
Well, it's not that I don't like it. It's just that I've heard it before.
Now, I think as you folks were coming in, they were playing Robert's new album, Mighty Rearranger, and I may even occasionally stop the interview to ask for a little bit of it, but I did want to, even beyond the obvious flattery that's mandatory in this situation, it's a really, really great album. It's a really fantastic record. And one of the things that was such a delight and surprise when I got it in the mail a while ago was that I remember a few years ago when you did Dreamland, a very beautiful album of songs that had influenced you coming up. I think we talked then and you said that you kind of felt that you wanted to go back to the well, you loved to perform, but as a writer, you had written what you wanted to write, and you really weren't sure that you cared to write anymore.
Yeah.
And now a couple of years go by, and suddenly there's some of the strongest and most vivid writing you've ever done. Something kicked that door open again.
That's right, yeah. I think they're in row 10. Strange Sensation. Can you stand up, please?
Stand up, Strange Sensation. Oh, they're supposed to be here. There it is. There's one of the best young bands in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's old sages of rock and roll. When they start droning on and on and on, it's just, I mean, you ain't even getting a free meal out of this. But the truth of the matter is that the music was so compulsive. We traveled, we'd been to the desert, we had an opinion of where music was becoming this kind of Valium, this awful sort of mesh of, well, I mean, even the term rhythm and blues has gone into some kind of cabaret area now. The whole idea of it being either incredibly alternative or, you know, just some kind of pap.
Yeah.
There's got to be middle ground where you could take all the, again, as we, at the beginning of the conversation, you take all those influences and you create, again, new. And our band have got such amazing influences from Portishead, from playing with Ronnie Size, from playing with Jar Wobble, from playing with Cass. There's so much music in there already and so many personalities in there that it's a very, very strong and cohesive unit. And when I had 10 tracks that sounded like the tracks I'd always wanted to hear somebody else do or anybody do, I just suddenly went, my God, it's coming back. And because, you know, a lot of people busk it. I don't know whether it's a chronological thing or whether it comes, you know, but, you know, you can hear people busking the music, getting away with it, just putting it out. Major labels say, yeah, this is great, we've got this new. But it's like, if it's not committed, there's no point in showing up because I'm way too far down the line now in my life to waste a second. So when I heard these tracks were developing in a garage with a laptop and a couple of microphones for a drum sound, I mean, on the one track it's mono drums onto camber. And it's just like, how can you replace that and make it smoother or whatever it is? We were off on a mission, and I'm here promoting the hell out of it.
Well, you know, as you should.
I've got a Grammy as well now.
So far, it's a good day.
Yeah.
If they throw in breakfast, you know, we could quit at lunch.
Only 37 years. Yeah.
Is that your first Grammy?
Yeah. Actually, no, I got one for, no, Jimmy and I got one for Kashmir and Unleaded.
But Led Zeppelin never won a Grammy.
Never, no. But,
Neil?
No, but it's not your fault. I can't blame you. It was the people who were in your position when I was 20. And 30. And 40. And 50. And 55. But no one sees it. You weren't around then anyway. Dropping acid somewhere around the corner.
Listening to Kashmir, no doubt. I mean, congratulations.
Only in America.
Oh, well, you know, it's so much better than a magazine interview because I realized that I was talking. I could actually stop trying to hopelessly describe it, and actually, you could hear it. The thing, I mean, okay, it's got Zeppelin and it's got Portishead and it's got Timbuktu and it's got all of those elements seamlessly woven together. But the other thing is, right at the heart of it is almost turns into, for 1 minute, what is the soul of a man? It almost goes back to the blues roots of it, and what's always there, what's always present in your work, no matter how many tangents go out on it, it always seems to go back to that blues core. And I'd like to talk. Well, let me shut up for a moment. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what got you into it and what keeps you going back to that source.
I don't know. I think maybe, and we all in this room have had a moment where music suddenly became the absolute only thing in your imagination and your mind. And for me as a kid, you know, I lived in England, and the whole radio setup, the whole exposure to music was really very muted. The post-war Britain was a very dour and very sort of understated and a place where there wasn't a lot of dynamism. And as a kid, didn't know what was going on, you know. I was hanging out. I once wrote a song called White, Clean and Neat about hanging onto my mom's skirts and just being in the warmth of my mother's care and attention, but having no idea of what was going on. And then I heard Elvis. And, you know, I was about 9 or something like that, and this voice came across in amongst Pat Boone and Johnny Mathis and all the stuff that was part of the Valium that we still know about today. Elvis came straight through, and he had the Blue Note. He was listening to Sleepy John Estes. He was listening to the guy who did That's All Right, Mama. Thank you, yeah. I get like that now. And he got all this stuff, Mystery Train, Junior Parker's Blue Flames. I didn't know anything about the references. I didn't know anything about what I know now, where it came from, but I heard that voice. And no matter how his image has been maligned and how it ended up, when I met Elvis with Led Zeppelin one evening in LA.
Oh, that alone, hold it, let's pause for a minute. Let's just drink that in for a second.
Hey, we could do this all around the country, you know.
Ed McMahon here.
Yeah, well, Elvis wanted to know who was this. He'd adopted a kid when he was in the forces in Germany in 1959, some sort of pen pal extremity thing, whatever it was. And this kid was a bit younger than the king himself, and was into Zeppelin. And we were involved with some people around that time who were booking out Elvis too. And Elvis wanted to know who was this bunch of guys who was selling tickets quicker than him. And so they said, it's Led Zeppelin. And we went to see him 2 or 3 times. And a couple of times he made mistakes. And I remember that night at the Forum, he was doing something like Reconsider Baby or whatever it was, the Lowell Fulson song. Yeah. And he stopped it and he said, wait a minute, we've got Led Zeppelin in here tonight, we've got to get this right. And I went, I mean, so I mopped the tears away, and we got the nod that we were going to meet him afterwards. And we went to the hotel, and they had the entire top floor. No motorbikes or snakes. They just had these trestle tables with a couple of big guys, and they ushered us to a suite down the hall. It was a tacky place. It was great. It was all purples and browns, and, you know.
He carried that with him, I believe.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The room was filling up with sort of second-hand Anne Margarets. There was a lot of...
Well, you know, it has to be said, a second-hand Anne Margaret is
nothing
still...
wrong with that, I can tell you. And I was looking at Stella Stevens over the other side of the room and salivating. It was a fantastic build-up. And the hall, at the end of this huge suite, which was almost as big as this room, a door kept opening and somebody kept popping their head around, just waiting for the temperature of the room and enough cosmetic to join the atmosphere so that it was getting a bit sort of feral. And then the door opened and this guy came through the door and my heart jumped. It was like, whoa, look at the way he moves. And I mean, he was just going around chairs like... He was so cool. And I mean, of course, he wasn't supposed to be cool, but he was, you know, a bit like us, I suppose. It's like and he came over to us and we stood in a circle for about 2 or 3 hours talking, and people kept coming by from his retinue, from his entourage, thinking that he'd had enough. He was going, no. We had a great conversation. And our manager, Led Zeppelin manager Peter Grant, is sort of quite well known as probably as much as John Paul Jones. You know, big guy, a very great presence about him. And Peter was just going past us on the way to taking a seat somewhere in the homage area.
Yeah. the second circle.
That's right, yeah. And he lost his footing a bit like our friend there, and he 350 pounds of joy ended up on Vernon Presley's lap. And Elvis's dad was really frail, with a white safari top. And we talked with Presley for about three hours. It just went on, and then we were talking about the root, and your question about where did it come from? It came from him, and he still got it. He still was into that whole Delta thing. He, you know, Good Rockin' Tonight, all that stuff that got him going in the first place. But he also knew, and he had a great sense of humor, and he knew that he was locked in this self-parody. I mean, when the songs dried up, when Lieber and Stoller and Pomus and Schumann, when that kind of whole era of creative writing started to wane and things changed, I didn't want to hear Elvis doing a Neil Diamond song.
Right.
I wanted him, I mean, it was bad enough him coming out of the army and doing Are You Lonesome Tonight, you know. I wanted him to stay wild, to give me all those edges, that kind of, that howl that he had. But, you know, he was just amazing and spectacular, and it was just that he really opened the door to my whole love of music. And because of him, and because of the choice of his material, I found out Smiley Lewis, you know, I found all those great singers, and now all these box sets that come out, some of the stuff that he did in the 60s, and was quite so well crafted.
Yeah.
Hank Garland's guitar playing, the stuff at RCA in Nashville, I mean, the recording of it, and his humor in the middle of it all is great. So it was a dream come true to meet him, but it was also just by chance that I heard him, and it affected me the way it did. And from Elvis straight through to the Tuareg guys in Timbuktu, it's a straight line.
Yeah.
It curves a bit, but the blue note is there all the way through my life. It's just calling to me.
Well, you know, and I think that's the thing, that the more time that goes by, the easier it is for people to get confused about how important Elvis's moment was, because, you know, because there's always the feeling that, well, they're not giving enough credit to Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Little Richard and so on, which is true.
Right.
But Elvis rearranged the mainstream. If Elvis hadn't taken it from How Much Is That Doggy in the Window and turned it into this is mainstream popular music, then Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis would not have had the opportunity to get through it all.
Sure, and he was also white, which was
That's right.
crucial, because that gave him the foot in the door that maybe Alan Freed was trying to do with Chuck and Bo and all that sort of stuff. But he was, and he was a great-looking guy, and he actually, that physical representation, by the time he got to England, guys were like hitting themselves on the head. Bang, what's going on? Who's this human being? It was fantastic in the middle of all that crap. You know, there was one shining star, and then of course you get exposed to, I mean, Bo Diddley, the man, and all that stuff. Yeah. And I was just, as you say, in the dark with my radio.
So I'm thinking of Marilyn Monroe's line. Now what's interesting is that you're out in the provinces. You're not in swinging London. You're following this trail as best you can on your own. I think you said once that the Beatles had the great advantage of being in a port city.
That's right.
Where the records were fairly easy to get.
Yeah, yeah.
And you were not. But what's interesting to me is that when you're a very young man, you know, just in the early teens, suddenly there's this great explosion of Mersey Beat and the beat groups and all that. And one would think that that actually opened a door for you, but you actually didn't want to be part of that, did you? You were looking for something else.
Well, I just, the thing is it's about translation, really. It's about if you get the tense of a verb wrong in any writing or any translation of anything, whether it's a New Testament or Chuck Berry,
yeah,
you can be in real trouble. And a lot of the English beat groups were in real trouble. And you could radically tell the difference. I mean, I defy most 90% of the white bands that try and play Chuck Berry music don't get it. Right. The rhythm, the way it winds and twirls around. And there was a sort of that backbeat thing. I mean, last night, Hubert Summerlin had a couple of amazing moments where he dragged his fingers down the bottom E string, and he gave us a bit of that Howlin' Wolf backbeat thing. And that's what I wanted. And I wanted to get as close to Son House and Charlie Patton and that sort of deal. And of course, my parents were horrified. Because, you know, first of all, it sounds weird, and secondly, it's from people who don't live around the corner, right. You know. Right. So they cut the plug off my record player, and...
Did they literally cut the plug in the record player?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
And they stopped you from taking guitar lessons, did they?
Yeah, I had one lesson. I know, isn't it silly? I mean, when you think about it, this is really silly, but, I mean, I learned to play Dance On by the Shadows in one lesson, and then it was all over.
Well, luckily, the singing thing worked out pretty well.
And I met a couple of decent guitarists on the way as well. They don't have my sort of blues finesse, but
that primitive untutored thing. Now, but as a young man, you begin playing in different groups and supporting some of, you know, I don't know, the Mersey Beats or the Searchers or whoever you were supporting.
Gene Vincent.
Gene Vincent. How old were you when you opened for Gene Vincent?
15.
Now, 15?
Yeah, at Stanbridge Town Hall in the Black Country. I mean, such a beautiful voice. We were talking last night about monitors, these things here, and how did people preserve their voices? I mean, when we first came to America in December 68, there were no monitors. And my PA amp was used to stop Bonzo's bass drum moving down the stage. and that's how old I am. And I used to have to maximum treble, maximum presence, and that was it. But Vincent was in the same boat 10 years prior to that, and he had the most beautiful voice. He didn't do all that, mama, mama. He just had this sweet, beautiful, beautiful voice. In those days, it must have been a miracle to preserve that voice, and he was always good.
Yeah.
He wasn't very happy. You know, he had a rough time, but he was a great, great singer. And for me to be opening the show for a guy like that, I mean, I was just all over the place. And I'm still really, when I saw Pine Top Perkins last night, and I sat in the middle of those two guys, Howlin' Wolf's guitarist and Muddy Waters' piano player, and the Golden God. It was like, I thought, how the bloody hell did I get in here? It was quite a thing, really. I mean, so, yeah, I'm a fan of that sort of, that dark blue note, and that was where I went. I kept away from the beat groups. I remember the stories about Muddy Waters when he first came to England. Now, when I worked with Alexis Corner, he told me that Muddy was booed off the stage for actually amplifying his guitar.
Wow.
So the general public and the media had decided that blues was only pure if it was brought to England with an acoustic, which was ridiculous, really. The fact that it actually ended up in some kind of hallowed environment instead of in a juke joint. where people were actually getting down. You know, that was already phony, you know. But it was great to behold, and at that time, two German promoters, Lippmann and Rau, peddled around Europe a huge blues packet every year from 62 to 66, I think. So we were able in provincial England to see Skip James, Sleepy John Estes, Bucka White.
So you're playing a gig. You're doing pretty well. You've got and of course, I also don't want to underestimate the fact that by '66 or '67, Tim Buckley and the Young Bloods and other things, other threads that still we hear in your music, are coming in, and you're playing in Band of Joy, I guess, and Jimmy Page appears in the back of the room, or so just came from the Crossroads, or so the myth goes. We've often heard Page tell the story of sort of, I couldn't believe this guy was so great and he sang so well and he looked great. I figured he must be a real jerk if nobody already hadn't made a star out of him. Yeah. But in fact, you turned out to be a good guy. So what's your memory of that moment when sort of, here comes Swingin' London, here comes the big time, walking into my bar?
Well, I got a couple of telegrams saying, if you'd like to join the Yardbirds, please call Gerard 6671. And I thought, somebody's taking the piss. It's not, this can't be right. The Yardbirds are washed up anyway. Who wants to join them? They're old blokes.
Well, you were what, 18 or 19?
I was 19, yeah.
And they were old men of 24 or something.
And I really thought that I was on a mission with Bonzo. Oh, he'd just gone off with Tim Rose to do Morning Dew forever. And I thought, no, it's like, you know, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. I'm going that way with my music, and it's going to last forever. And then I got a second telegram, and I thought, So they came up to see me, Pagey and Chris Dreyer with Peter Grant. And they came up to me, and they looked at me, and they said, are you the roadie? We're looking for Robert Plant. I said, no, I'm everything. I drive the van, I get the gear out, I sing, and then, you know, I go back to my room. And they said, well, it's pretty good. We'll give you a call. And I thought, Christ, Terry Reid had said to me, you should do this, man, because you're never going to get anywhere doing what you're doing. I said, well, if it's that good, why don't you do it? And he said, no, I'm self-sufficient, you know. But, I got the call and I went down to Page's place in Pangbourne. He said, bring down choice. And I'd been living rough for a while, and I was living at Terry Reid's house at the time. So I packed a suitcase, got to Pangbourne, knocked on the door opened, and this girl who was part of Dr. John's Night Trippers backing group was dressed in a net curtain. And opened the door, and my suitcase fell out of my hand, and I went, I love the Yardbirds. I thought, shit, and it's still daylight. So I went in, and we both accessed similar songs. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, you know, and You Shook Me, and we talked about Otis Rush. He wasn't that keen on Moby Grape, but I kept pushing it back to the front of the pile, like, listen to that voice. And that was it. But there was so much affinity musically, stylistically, we were both into the same stuff. That's what Bonzo chose. He said there was a choice of whether to do it or not, but we'd have had a long walk home. But yeah, we were really quite naive, but we were also very bumptious. People would cross the road to avoid us. Bonzo and I'd be walking along, and you'd see people going, oh Christ, they're over there. People would cross over. And we didn't, where we lived in the Midlands, we really used to give other bands some stick. When Black Sabbath finally got their record deal, they used to play the clubs around Birmingham, and Bonzo used to say, you know, you're so shit. But if you, and later on down the line, when Bonzo got a bit more eloquent, we went to see somebody in New York, and he called him Deep Sabbath, which was a kind of generic for the whole thing.
Better than black purple, I
Yeah.
guess.
But if you think about it, our reputation has been labelled and lumped along with that sort of mindset in general media terms for such a long time. It's horrific to think that, you know, all the bits and pieces that we did, you know, wandering across the mountains in Morocco with tape machines and going off, and then in the end you end up in the same pile
Heavy metal
as
band.
Paranoid. Yeah. You know. Okay, now it's done a lot of good for Seattle. I know that. And I've got nothing against them. I know the guys really well. They'd only come out of the room. You know, but anyway, that's how it was. Yeah, we were in Birmingham, and we were very, very pleased with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it goes without saying that when the four of you got in a room together, it wasn't the Yardbirds anymore.
No, it was a kind of, I mean, Bonds and I'd stretched a lot of stuff in the Band of Joy. We were doing a lot of Moby Grape stuff, excuse me, and some Arthur Lee stuff, and we were touching on blues, but it was, I suppose, like a very heavy progressive rock type of blues. So it made absolute sense if you think about the way that the Yardbirds had moved. If you discount the kind of pop records, they were still quite experimental and very interesting. So it was unbelievable. Bonds and I couldn't believe that we were in the presence of these guys who could extend musical parts for such a long time. And it would be really creative and interesting. And I hear it now, and although it's got a time set to it, because of the musicality of the time, our musical references changed as the years went on. You know, it went from Chuck Berry and Eddie Cochran through to Alphonse Mouzon and Bernard Purdie, you know, and James Brown in the Powder period, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it was amazing to think that you could actually open the music up like that. Later on down the line, the songs got longer and longer. And I was able to pick up a few new languages.
During the solos?
Yeah, I just nip off and I had a little Berlitz course of early Welsh. And yeah, and then I'd come back on again. And the drum solos did carry on for quite a while too. We had a guy called Johnny Lark who used to be in a group called Nero and the Gladiators, beat group, whose only job was to run down the corridors of these huge, or whatever they were called, stadiums. And you could hear his feet flap, 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 and he'd come through the door and go, "Sticks, chaps," which meant that Bonzo had finally left his handwork on the tops and picked up the sticks again, so Moby Dick was going to end any week now. So, and then we'd have to finish whatever we were doing, you know, back up a bit, and then, you know, get dressed and then leg it back to the stage.
During those iconic moments that we've seen so many photos of, where you and Jimmy are sort of leaning back to back in the spotlight, and you know, you're howling and he's winding, and you know, occasionally you'll be apparently exchanging the secrets of the universe to each other. What were you actually saying?
Well, I think Jimmy had spotted a female in the crowd. We were the original boy band, I think, because so many guys came there to kind of go, I don't know how they do it here, but so there now and again there was a female. And that was what it was, and what I was saying to him, look, we're so pretty. What's going on? Why is it all these guys going... But everybody felt all right at the end of it, I think.
Yeah, I think everybody felt okay. The references, what's also interesting is that at times you got in hot water, or, you know, purists who had just discovered Willie Dixon the week before would suddenly write a piece for, you know, the Fresh Fruit Underground Revolutionary newspaper, and say, you know, say, hey, those lines aren't original, and, you know, then someone who had stolen the publishing from that guy would come and issue a writ. It always seemed to me, and you know, tell me, maybe you were just ripping them off. But you know, it always seemed to me that you were trying to constantly make that thread back. You were saying to people, no matter how crazy and psychedelic the middle part of Whole Lotta Love is, look, it actually connects back to You Need Love.
Yeah,
Actually.
and things like, if you like, When the Levee Breaks, we always credited it to be a group composition and an adaptation of a Memphis Mini song. Now, of course, we put that on the label. The royalty...
I'm turning down the talk shows, the humor in the couch. I'm moving up to higher ground. I've found a new way out. There's parasols and barbecues and lounges by the pool, the late night conversations filled with 20th century cool. My peers may flirt with cabaret, some fake the rebel yell. Me, I'm moving up to higher ground. I must escape this hell. And it goes on for a couple more verses.
But can you do the next verse?
Oh, by all means.
It's my favorite.
If there's a bustle in your hitch, I'm sorry. Oh, now I've ruined the whole vibe.
No, it's all the same shit, really.
No, this is actually great. Let me suspend my thirst for knowledge in your powder, sweat, and sighs. A grudge of Christian women, a stain of spotless wives, a perfect destination inside a perfect world. I take the bottle to the baby, you take the hammer to the pearl. Every day's like Sunday down here on memory lane. Salad days and no good ways drive me quite insane. A cocktail-clouded troubadour attempts to speak in tongues. He said enough, I'm through the door. I'm moving right along. That's pretty good.
Sometimes I despair of, you know, what is considered to be the way. You know, I see a lot of my friends and I go, oh man, come on. And they say, calm down, take a pill, you know. Put him in the corner over there, he'll chat to that mirror.
But have you ever, all right, now, since it's kind of an industry crowd, I mean, let's ask an industry question.
Oh, is it?
And I hope Bill Kerbishley isn't going to break my arm. But have you ever felt, as you have resisted the unbelievable amounts of money, glory, fame, and women in curtains that have been offered to you, to one more tour, do it for the fans, come on, Robert, we gotta, you know, Led Zeppelin for all those who didn't get a chance to see him. The temptations that have come at you from every direction have been endless, including, you know, from people who just love the music and want to see you guys together in some form. And you've fled and fled. Have you ever felt like the people who have a motivation and a burning desire on a business side to get that last payday, let's say the record company, the agents, or whoever it might, the lighting guys, have sometimes maybe not done all they could to promote your solo work in the hope that Robert would come to his senses?
Absolutely. I do think that that might be the case. Also, I have to say that it's not that I've been obstructive, it's just that it meant what it meant when it meant it. And beyond that, there was no story.
Yeah.
And with John's passing and all that stuff, it was gone. There's no need for it. But the crudité, the whole thing about this game is that you can shake it one time for me. You know, that's what it's all about. Put them out there on the road again. And the thing is that Zepp was at its best. It peaked, and when it was peaking, when it was happening, it was world-beating, and it was a wholehearted, big, beautiful soul. And after that, there's no going back. You can't do it again. And yeah, there might be a few more women in the crowd this time around if we did it, but you know, what I've done now with these guys is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, right. You know, and I believe in it, and I love the places that I go to and play, and you know, we played in Kane's Ballroom in Tulsa the other day, and it was a fantastic place to be. It was amazing, you know. And then the Gypsy Tea Doodle in Dallas was amazing. Blind Lemon used to play on the corner. There's 1,100 people in there, and I know them all because I can see them all, I can feel them all. I'm not in an aircraft hangar anymore trying to be a big shot. Yeah. You know, so I'm at home.
Right.
And there's no sincerity about that. It's just a fact. I feel really good about telling the truth. Not this truth. This is modified, but...
Yeah. but that's what you got into it for in the first place.
Yeah, the truth at midnight. Yeah. Tonight.
Tonight at midnight tonight, when we all cram in there to see Robert and Strange's sensation play, I got and I don't want to pretend that you know, I get phone calls from you all the time. I certainly don't. But I remember that right after, although if there's any girls in the crowd, yes, I do. A couple of summers ago, the Led Zeppelin DVD and the live album and all that stuff came out. It was fantastic, and it went right to the top of the charts, and it broke all records for DVD sales, and it really was exciting. And at that time, you know, every monitor mixer and agent was coming up to me going, "This summer they're going to do it. The halls are being booked. Robert can't say no to this."
Yeah, John Bon Jovi once said, "Hey man," he said, "just put some chairs in the Mojave Desert. You'll fill it."
You'll fill it.
Yeah. I said, "Right, man."
But.
Yeah, John Bon Jovi once said, "Hey man," he said, "just put some chairs in the Mojave Desert. You'll fill it."
You'll fill it.
I said, "Right, man."
But well, you know, but right after that, there was a sort of this moment of, "Where's Robert? Where's Robert?" And you called me. I don't remember why. I was probably trying to get you to do something you didn't want to do on television. But you called me from above the Arctic Circle.
Oh yeah.
You were on a steamer playing for Eskimos. I mean, it sounds like a cartoon. But
But I am a cartoon. Yeah.
But I mean, right at the height of that mania, where you know, you guys were sort of coming to New York and they were showing the film and people were crowding the streets, you just split to the North Pole.
We went to the Nordkap, which is the northernmost part of the European landmass, and we played in the visitors centre to 200 Sami Laplanders. And the visitors centre was cut into the rock, and there were some big, huge windows hewn out of the cliff behind us. And there, beyond, hundreds of feet down, you could see the Arctic Ocean going out to the North Pole. And we just travelled for about a week with the crew, having a great time. We'd do the gig, get back on this boat. I mean, it took us 4 days to go down before we reached the tree line, where the trees arrived again. And we just play the gigs, drink a lot of fresh beer, eat some seagull's eggs, ravage, and then go to sleep and get up in the boat and just be pulling into the next Arctic spot. It was fantastic. It was either that or go to Manhattan.
Yeah.
And
play 52 nights at the Garden.
And be patted on the back by all the old coke dealers who've cleaned up.
Well,
I know who you are.
They've now got some internet opportunities for you.
I think I remember.
It is, you know, I always treasure that because I thought, to me, as a fan, it was such a beautiful image. It is kind of the end of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You know, that they're going off on the ship into the new world and the adventure continues somewhere outside of the spotlight.
Until they close the bar.
Until they close the bar and the boat moves on.
Yeah.
Robert, thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, good. Thank you.
What song should we sing out on?
Another Tribe.
Can we play Another Tribe? And we'll see everybody at midnight tonight, right? Robert Plant, the real deal.
Well done, that was wonderful. Great.